Hey everybody, it's Dwayne here with Maverick Games Learning and Support Services. I've got another video talking about Dungeons and Dragons and virtual tabletops today. I've been doing a lot of research, a lot of reading, and of course lots of hands-on, and it's getting to the point now where the conversation about virtual tabletops, it's kind of starting to annoy me. Mainly because we live in a world full of hate. A hate of change, a hate of new things, and a hate of just anything that's different than what we're used to, it seems like. I've gone down that YouTube rabbit hole, and it's basically gotten to the point now where every content creator that's talking about Dungeons & Dragons and virtual tables has just a supreme amount of hate geared towards Wizards of the Coast and their new upcoming virtual table. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and why I am genuinely excited about it, and why I think some of these people who are hating need to take a step back and look in the mirror and ask themselves, why are they hating on it? So let's get started. You're probably going to wonder why I've got a window down here queued up with a virtual table. We'll get to that in a minute. That virtual table specifically is made by a company called Harpy, and I am using that virtual table right now, and I am actually quite enjoying it. But let's just talk about virtual tables in general. So right now, as we know, there are lots of solutions out there for gamers and dungeon masters who want to run online Dungeons & Dragons games. We have Roll20. We have Foundry, we have lots of other ones. Tailspire is even one that jumped out at me recently as well. But there's lots of options, so we're definitely not lacking in the area of having tools at our disposal. I had a conversation recently about this kind of a topic with a friend, and the topic came up about the world that we live in now versus the world that we lived in when I grew up with role-playing games, and whether or not I, as a dungeon master, need to be chasing that particular style of play that I grew up with. What I mean by that is friends gathered around a table, sitting around enjoying our company, enjoying the game that we love, with paper, pens, dice, and books. So then we fast forward to where we are now, and we live in a different world, but we now are playing Dungeons & Dragons with access to digital tools. We can play online with friends, and we can now even play online with visual interfaces akin to video games. So it's definitely changed as far as how we enjoy this hobby. But the question that we had with each other is, what's more important? I have been chasing that carrot, the carrot being that feeling of sitting around the table and just rolling dice and being in one space. And that feeling that I got and using paper character sheets and physical miniatures. That's the carrot I've been chasing. But the question came up is what's more important? How we play, or just the fact that we're playing the game that we love? And the conclusion that we came to is I think it's just the fact that we just need to play the game that we enjoy. How we play it is not so much as important as the fact that we do play it. So specifically targeting online play with virtual tabletops. I just, full disclosure, Maverick Games Learning and Support Services is a business that I own and run. It is my full-time job. And my business is supporting children with autism and other exceptionalities through the joy of gaming. That takes most of it takes place within my Dungeons and Dragons gaming hobby, but I do have other programs that I run yearly as well that tap into other types of genres of games. Specifically, I run 5 Dungeons and Dragons groups a week. So this is a full-time job, and I run 2-hour sessions, and all of them are online except for one. My online sessions vary as far as age group and knowledge and maturity, but I use online virtual tables and tools to bring Dungeons & Dragons alive for them. So what we do is we interface through various tool sets, Dungeons & Dragons Beyond being one of them, and most recently Harpy Virtual Tabletop. Why am I not just going basic theater of the mind? Well, first off, the children that I support specifically thrive in an environment with visual interfaces, with visual cues, anything that is somewhat tangible, that can be moved around, or it helps them spark their imagination. As great as theater of the mind is, we all sometimes need a little bit of a visual prompt to get our brains kicked into gear. So I use virtual tabletop specifically for that reason. Now, all the other tools that I use is in support of that, but for the most part, we use Dungeons & Dragons Beyond as a way to interact with our character sheets and such. Most recently, I've landed on Harpy. as a 3D virtual tabletop. And one of the key reasons for that is the ability to really supercharge their imagination with actually 3D tokens or miniatures, much akin to how the Dungeons & Dragons virtual tabletop is going to be rolled out. Now, the conversations around virtual tabletops that I've seen, and a lot of the negativity flying around it, is that it's going to pull the game of Dungeons & Dragons in a direction that it shouldn't be pulled in, most notably into the realm of a quasi video game type experience. And then some of the discussions is and I've even had some where I've looked at some videos and discussions about how the virtual tabletop doesn't provide enough tools. One group of people were discussing how horrible it was that it didn't have animations where the miniatures would interact with each other. It didn't have the ability to have sound effects or just a whole gamut of technical things that they wanted. And yet at the same time, they were complaining about the virtual tabletop destroying Dungeons & Dragons. So I really don't get the hate. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use a virtual tabletop. And I think if you take a step back and look at all the content creators that are using virtual tabletops, it varies in how they use them. I've seen some great uses of virtual tabletops where they actually use it to help and enhance the gameplay. And I've also seen some pretty lazy virtual tabletop users where they simply just move tokens around a table and really just lack the atmosphere. The Dungeon Master just kind of dials it in. So let's talk about the right way to use a virtual tabletop. First and foremost, it's there to service the imagination. It is not there to replace the imagination. It's not in any way going to. If you are playing on a virtual tabletop with flat tokens, perhaps like Roll20, Foundry, you're simply just getting a bird's eye view of the table. As a Dungeon Master, you need to fill in the blanks. It needs to be something that you go in and say, well, here's your positioning specifically, but here's what you hear, here's what you see, here's what you smell. Throw in sound effects. A virtual tabletop doesn't need to provide all of that. At a bare minimum, it's used just to help orient the player's mind as far as positioning and perhaps in-game terms like, range and movement. So it's not there by any means to paint the picture for the players. Now, talking about the D&D Virtual Tabletop, they are taking it really a step further. They're actually going to be using the Unreal Engine 5 to deliver us this virtual tabletop. So you can expect animated water, you're probably going to expect flames and all sorts of various sound effects and visual effect palettes, and not to mention just gloriously portrayed 3D miniatures. I fully expect to be shelling out money for some of this content. Well, that's a different topic altogether, but I totally intend to. If there are assets that will enhance my game, I will pay money for it. Let's talk a little bit about that. Right now, virtual tabletops as they are, pretty much don't require you to purchase any assets. The creators obviously are going to want you to, and they will sell token packs and things like that. But luckily, I am fairly adept. I'm a junior graphic designer. I say junior, but I'm 50 years old this year. But I am quite adept at Photoshop. So I can create a lot of my own visual assets for these tabletops. But if you're not able to do that, and especially when you look at a 3D virtual table, I would imagine Wizards is going to gatekeep all of this content behind a paywall. So let me ask you this, Dungeon Masters out there who are playing around a table, perchance. You obviously are investing money into your tabletop experience. You're buying miniatures, you're buying terrain. I know I do. So at this point, if you embrace the virtual tabletop, why would it not be acceptable just to buy virtual miniatures? Outside of the fact that you're going to complain about the fact that you'll always own them, and if the service goes down, you don't own them. Well, let's put it this way. If the world crashes and companies start going out of business, I will probably redirect my time and energy into different hobbies, and I'll just remember the good times I had with all those virtual assets and not worry about collecting them. Point being, I intend to pay money for things if I believe that they're going to deliver value. I'm not spending my time hating on this business model. So if I need to buy a beautifully rendered 3D dragon for my next session, then I will do that. If they sell me a dungeon pack that consists of, various pre-generated dungeons that are well done, then I will spend money on that because I believe that it adds value to my gaming experience. So my guess is that that's what will happen. But back to the visual presentation, you can expect this virtual tabletop to look beautiful. It's going to have rendered backgrounds. It's going to have, taverns and dungeons and mountains and forests. But that doesn't mean that your job as a game master, as a dungeon master, is over. That's just the beginning of it. So keep that in mind as you navigate this world of virtual tables, is that it's not trying to replace your efforts and the old way of playing D&D. It's just there to supplement for the people that need it. So let's talk about Harpy for a second. Harpy is a free virtual tabletop. Free in the sense that you do get basic services out of it, but I highly recommend the subscription model. It is a cross between a fully realized 3D virtual table and a flat 2D table and, for lack of better words, a real table. The way that this is handled is that it creates a flat playing surface, which you can overlay your own maps, maps pulled from the internet or maps that you've created through services like Incarnate. I haven't actually used Dungeon Alchemy yet, but it doesn't support 3D maps, so you can't create something in Dungeon Alchemy with 3D rendering and import it into Harpy and expect to have all that physics as far as walls and such like that. It does, however, support animated maps, which is very cool. I've tried out a couple, and as long as you've got good bandwidth and some good computing power, it should be fine. But again, if you are able to procure animated maps with water, wind, whatever the case may be, bushes, Harpy does support that. So that's a cool feature. Recently, I've actually been using Incarnate, as well as maps pulled from the internet. And the beautiful thing about Harpy is in its simplicity. You can literally put a map down, upload a map, it grids it out. You preferably would be an ungridded map, but if you do have a grid map, you can align it. But you could actually put an ungridded map down and Harpy will create the grid and you can scale it to fit based on how big you want your squares to be. Or you can just leave it gridless. Harpy has a built-in tool that allows you to actually draw lines from object to object, and it'll tell you how many distance in feet, to save the whole measuring as players move their token from one square to the next. So how I've been using Harpy is I've been using it to supplement my game. So this is a board that lays flat on the table. You can rotate this board, you can move it around, and I'm going to show you in a second how this works. But I'm using it to supplement my narrative and supplement with my descriptions. So let's jump in and I'm going to show you how I use Harpy Virtual Tabletop. So right now I've got a scene queued up. And this is a simple scene. They're exploring a cave filled with gnolls. Right off the bat, Harpy lets you zoom out. So I've got fully access. And now this runs in a cloud browser as well. So, or in a web browser, sorry. But this is all run in cloud. There's no program that you need to download or purchase. And I can scale out to whatever distance I want, as far as being able to look at the whole table as a whole. Harpy does not have sort of physical assets that allow for blocking of line of sight. So right now you can use a fog of war to block out aspects of your dungeon and map, which is really cool. So it's not all revealed to players. You can actually fog of war certain elements of this, which I've done, and then just erase on the fly as players explore. So it's quite simple. In this particular case, I've got a combination of 3D assets and I've got some paper tokens, as we call them. Now on the 3D asset side, you're probably wondering, where did I get these from? Well, these are imported directly from a service called Hero Forge. If you haven't used Hero Forge, you need to get over there. But these are miniatures that I've purchased from Hero Forge, and they've directly been stitched over to my Harpy account. In fact, it's a completely transparent process. I buy it in Hero Forge, it shows up on my Harpy table. I don't have to import anything whatsoever. So these creations are creations that are done in Hero Forge and brought in. My guess is very similar to how the business model will work with the Dungeons and Dragons VTT, in that they're going to sell you miniature packs and then you'll just drag and drop them from your compendium onto the table. So in this case here, I've got a young adventurer and he is engaged in combat with some gnolls. Now, this tabletop does not stitch with Dungeons and Dragons Beyond. You can use this actually virtual tabletop with any game that you want to play. So I don't have statistics already at hand. So currently we are using D&D Beyond as a sort of moment-to-moment tool, and then the virtual table is where we keep our focus on. I'll use this for tactical play, But sometimes I'll use it just for roleplay as well, just to give the players a sense of their environment and such. So, you know, I might plunk their tokens down on a table without combat happening, just to help them visualize. Now, in this situation, I have a grid lined up. But you know what? I'm going to remove the grid because I don't really think that I need it. So I'm going to actually just go like this, and I'm going to get rid of the grid. There's a pre-existing grid on the table, but again, if you want, there is a measuring tool. You can simply go up to the ruler and you can just drag and drop and it'll tell you the distance. So that's a tool that I would recommend using just to remove some of the immersion breaking aspects of using a gridded table. So in this case, we have a player facing off against a null, and you'll see down below, Harpy also has an integrated initiative tracking system, very much like a lot of the new role-playing games are using on like Xbox and PC, where they queue up a visual tracker showing you down below a picture of the player as opposed to a numerical value. I love this, in actual fact. One of the problems that I have with numerical value is D&D already has a lot of math going on as it is to expect your players to keep track of. So keeping track of an initiative is just another number onto the pile. Now, I've also gone and created paper tokens, and this particular token is actually from Harpy. Harpy has some pre-generated ones, and that was really great because it happened to be that I had a hyena in this encounter with the gnoll. So I just went into Harpy and I dropped an asset. And I'll show you what that looks like here. So say you need to drop an asset. If you've got some pre-created ones already, which I highly recommend you doing based on the adventure you're running, but if you say have an adventure full of orcs, then go in, create an orc in the Harpy Codex, and hopefully, if you don't have the photoshopping capabilities at hand, you can just go onto the internet and grab a picture, and Harpy will create a flat token for you. But I'm going to show you right here with some pre-generated ones that I've got. So let's just say these are all my Hero Forge tokens. So let's just say I need a goblin. So I can click on the goblin and I can drop him right here. There we go. So I've got a goblin in the mix now. And this is another Hero Forge creation, but he's on the table ready to go. Now, like I said, regrettably, he doesn't have stats or anything like that. So you'll have to use your Dungeon Master skills to figure out how you're going to track all these enemies and hit points and stuff like that. I've gone and created, taking it a step further, I've gone and created some tokens within Harpy so that I can drop tokens to allow players to track and see how much damage they're doing to enemies on the table itself. Just like you'd see if you're playing a game of like Warhammer or, you know, any other miniature game that you're playing these days, like a board game. A little bit of immersion breaking, but you know, it helps in the long run for tracking. It's also great for players because as the damage starts to stack up, players start to lose, lose perspective on how much damage they've inflicted. So this allows them to see, oh my God, I've pummeled the crap out of this monster and he's still not dead. It allows them to see it on the table. You can pick up those tokens and move them around to get them out of the way if you want as well. So as far as the virtual table goes, just to help you out, I actually ran this encounter. And every step of the way, I proceeded to explain and describe everything that was happening. I make it a point in every use of virtual tables. I have a couple of ground rules. I say to my players, one, you're not allowed to pick up your token and move it unless you describe what's happening. So nobody's allowed to just say, I move here. That's sort of the bane of every Dungeon Master's life when it comes to creating kind of a good feeling adventure, is that people just start moving their tokens around. It happens on all virtual tables. So I have a rule where I say you're not allowed to move your token until you describe what you're doing. Even if it's something as simple as saying, hey, like this, and he decides to attack that gnoll. The player can't just say, I go here and roll dice and attack. You know, I want the players to navigate. And then I, like myself, I always commit to my players that after revealing a virtual table scene, I will then fill it in with a narrative description so that the two go hand in hand. They're getting the words from me and they're getting the visual from the table. So that's just sort of a quick little snippet of what I'm doing with my Harpy table, and I am fully excited and rip-roaring ready to go with any new technology that comes down the pipe. I will always use what's going to help my players the most, even if it means using a virtual table in person to give them that sort of extra little boost of imagination. I am not above using the tools we have, and like I said, I think it's more important that I'm enjoying my hobby in this current day and age than chasing a dream of playing it the way that I played it as a child. I think we've gone past that now, and I think we owe it to the new generation of gamers to at least lean into some of this new technology and virtual tabletops to make it a good experience for them. So thanks for tuning in. I did want to make a little bit of a footnote. If you followed us to the end of this video, the Game Nexus YouTube channel that you're watching this on is going to be transitioning to the Maverick Games Learning and Support Service channel, or MGLSS YouTube channel. Our content will alter a little bit. We're going to be focusing more on tabletop experiences, less on video game, but mostly the content's going to be framed around what I do for a living, which is how I use these tools and how I use these games to support children with special needs. So hopefully you'll find something in there that resonates with you or somebody that you know, but I'll keep delivering the content around the games I love and the games I play. So make sure you subscribe. When this transition does occur, notifications will get disabled as the channel transitions to a new name. So if you aren't getting updates and videos from me, make sure you revisit the page and recheck your notifications. That means that once the channel has changed its name, you'll get the new updates or the new notifications from the MGLSS channel. So thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. Everything you guys do to support me is great. I'm reaching for the stars and I haven't quite gotten there yet. So every little bit of a share, every bit of a like and a subscription or a sub or a follow, it all helps. So have a great day out there, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.